April 14, 1865. President Abraham Lincoln walked into Ford's Theater wearing a custom Brooks Brothers greatcoat, hand-stitched into the silk lining. One country, one destiny. He never came back. The coat survived. For the next century, the Donn family kept it. Souvenir-hunters cut pieces from the bloodstained left shoulder until the sleeve detached. Today, the coat lives at Ford's Theater. For 202 years, Brooks Brothers dressed America's presidents. On July 8, 2020, America's oldest clothing brand filed for Chapter 11. The store is still open. What's inside is not Brooks Brothers anymore. Here is how 202 years of American clothing died, and 5 brands still doing it right. April 7, 1818, the corner of Catherine and Cherry Streets, Lower Manhattan. A 45-year-old merchant named Henry Sands Brooks opens a clothier called H&DH Brooks & Company. The neighborhood at the time is a working dockside district feeding the rapidly growing port of New York. Henry has spent decades in the local New York trade before this. He puts his savings into one storefront. His founding policy is plain: make and deal only in merchandise of the best quality. Sell it at a fair profit. Deal only with people who seek and are capable of appreciating such merchandise. The phrase becomes the spine of the house for 2 centuries. Henry dies in 1833. His son Henry Jr. takes over and holds the line. In 1849, the California gold rush sends thousands of men west who need clothing before the next ship sails. Brooks Brothers responds with the first ready-to-wear suit on American soil. In 1850, the Golden Fleece descends as the house emblem, a sheep suspended by a ribbon, lifted from the medieval order of the Golden Fleece. In 1851, the surviving brothers, Daniel Hamilton, John, Elisha, and Edward Brooks, rebrand the operation as Brooks Brothers. Abraham Lincoln walks into the Broadway store as a regular customer through his presidency. Brooks Brothers becomes the clothier of the Union political establishment. Then the Civil War arrives. New York State troops need uniforms. Brooks Brothers takes the contract. When good wool runs short, the company presses shredded rags and decaying scraps into uniform cloth that falls apart in the rain. The word for that recycled cloth, shoddy, had existed in British textile mills since the 1830s. The Brooks Brothers Civil War contract scandal of 1862 takes it from technical jargon into common American English. The new adjective stands for cheap and dishonest work. The United States government investigates through the New York State Legislature. The settlement requires Brooks Brothers to replace approximately 2,350 defective uniforms. The cost reaches approximately $45,000, equivalent to roughly $11 million today. The scandal is real. The damage is real. Even in the founding century, the house could compromise quality under pressure. The lesson sat on the ledger and was quietly forgotten. By July 1863, the city itself turned. The New York Draft Riots brought working-class crowds into the streets. Most of the rioters were Irish immigrants. They were enraged by a wartime law that let wealthy men buy a $300 draft substitute. On July 14th, the mob descended on the Brooks Brothers store at Catherine and Cherry. Harper's Weekly documented the looting. Approximately $50,000 in goods left the windows. The brand was now both the uniform of the Union and a target of the class resentment that uniform generated. By the turn of the century, the worst of the scandal was decades old, and Brooks Brothers was set for its golden age. The year 1900 changes American clothing twice in the same season. Brooks Brothers introduces the #1 sack suit, soft-shouldered, undarted front, plain front trouser, a 3-roll 2-lapel that becomes the most influential suit silhouette in American history. The brand will spend the 1910s perfecting it. The construction is full canvas with horsehair chest pieces hand-padded into the lapel. The shoulder is unstructured. The drape falls from the natural collarbone, not from a built-up pad. The same year, Brooks Brothers introduces the original polo button-down Oxford shirt. John Brooks, grandson of the founder, had watched English polo players 4 years earlier in 1896. Their collars buttoned down so they would not flap in the wind across the field. He brings the idea home. The 1900 launch becomes the foundation of the American Oxford category. In 1915, the Madison Avenue flagship opens at 346 Madison Avenue. The location signals the brand's move into the heart of the American professional class. Through the 1920s and 1930s, the camel hair polo coat becomes the uniform of the Ivy League weekend. The coat originated as a Brooks Brothers adaptation of a British polo player's between chucker warmer. The American version takes off across Princeton, Yale, and Harvard campuses. The clientele lists itself: presidents, senators, Wall Street partners, newspaper publishers. The store becomes the unstated wardrobe of the men running the country. In 1945, Franklin Delano Roosevelt sits at Yalta between Churchill and Stalin wearing a Brooks Brothers cape. The photograph travels around the world. The cape is American clothing photographed at the highest level of statecraft. The construction behind that image is the part the audience over 40 still remembers in the hand. Full canvas tailoring on the suit. American mills supplying the cloth. Hand-finished buttonholes. 2-ply long staple cotton on the Oxford. Unfused collars built with a sewn-in interlining. Mother-of-pearl buttons shank-stitched into the placket. The shirts were soft after the first wash and held their shape for a decade. The suits broke in across the shoulder rather than collapsing at the chest. The polo coat shrugged off a North Atlantic winter. The Madison Avenue store on a Saturday in 1948 had the atmosphere of a club. The salesman knew the customers by name and by collar size, and by the year their fathers had walked in. The store kept handwritten records of every customer measurement going back decades. A man's son could inherit not just the suit, but the file. In 1946, the Brooks family sells the company to Julius Garfinkel and Company. It is the first ownership outside the family in 128 years. The transition is quiet. The house policy carries forward. The construction does not change. The Garfinkel ownership keeps the operation independent enough to preserve the standards. The boys who came home from the Second World War walk into the Madison Avenue store in their uniforms and walk out in the #1 sack suit. The peak holds. Garfinkel ownership runs from 1946 through 1980. It is a calm chapter. In 1953, Brooks Brothers partners with DuPont and launches the wash and wear shirt under the Brooks cloth and Brooks weave names. It is the first apparel use of Dacron fiber. American homes are adopting the washing machine in mass numbers across the same decade. The wash and wear shirt arrives at the moment the suburban wife is moving into the labor force and needs the laundry routine simpler. Innovation continues without sacrificing the core tailored lines. Through the 1960s, the Ivy League look becomes a cultural moment. John F. Kennedy favors the #2 sack suit, the 2-button modern variant. Robert McNamara, the whiz kids at the Pentagon, the partners at white shoe law firms, the editors at Time and Life magazines, they all wear the cloth. The brand is no longer ahead of its customers. It is the uniform of its customers. Quality holds through this period. The corporate owner does not push the construction down. The Garland, North Carolina shirt factory becomes the spine of American shirt manufacturing for the next several decades. In 1980, Garfinkel sells Brooks Brothers to Allied Stores Corporation for approximately $228 million. Allied is a department store holding company in the middle of the 1980s leveraged buyout wave that reshaped American retail. In 1986, Allied passes to Campo Corporation in the Reichmann Brothers hostile takeover era that defines the decade in American retail. The brand is now an asset on a balance sheet held by a Canadian real estate developer who has borrowed against its inventory. Campo financed the deal with junk bonds. The interest payments crowded the operating budget. The next sale is coming. May 3, 1988. Campo Corporation sells Brooks Brothers to Marks & Spencer plc for $750 million. The buyer is not the Marks family. It is a giant British public retailer, the largest in the United Kingdom, expanding into the American market. Forbes and Businessweek run the story in April of 1988, with analyst quotes calling the price wildly inflated. At the time of sale, Brooks Brothers operates 47 United States stores and 21 Japanese joint venture locations. Marks & Spencer is a competent retailer in its home market. It built its British reputation on basics and on private label food and on a tightly controlled British supply chain. It is not a competent steward of the specific American tradition it has just acquired. The strategy through the 1990s tries to modernize the brand without alienating the heritage. The strategy fails on both ends. The traditional customer feels the shift in the shoulder and the fabric weight. The modern customer does not arrive in the numbers the spreadsheet required. Office casualization accelerates across the same decade. Casual Friday spreads through corporate America in the mid-1990s and becomes casual every day by the end of the decade. The Wall Street uniform begins losing its workplace. The Silicon Valley founder in a fleece vest replaces the Manhattan partner in a Brooks Brothers suit as the cultural image of American business power. Manufacturing quietly diversifies offshore on the lower-tier lines. The Madison Avenue main line holds at first, then bends. In 1998, Brooks Brothers launches its first 100% cotton non-iron shirt under the Brooksies name. The chemistry is a formaldehyde resin in the DMDHEU family that cross-links the cotton fibers and prevents creasing. It also breaks down after 15 to 20 wash cycles, taking some of the fabric integrity with it. The label still says cotton. The hand of the cotton is no longer the hand the audience remembers. By the late 1990s, Marks & Spencer is hemorrhaging cash at its parent operation in the UK. The American subsidiary becomes a sale candidate. Tommy Hilfiger Corporation, Saks Fifth Avenue, Neiman Marcus, May Department Stores, and Bain Capital all considered bids through 2001. November 23, 2001. Marks & Spencer sells Brooks Brothers to Retail Brand Alliance. The buyer is controlled by Claudio Del Vecchio. The price is $225 million in cash. The British retailer absorbs a loss of approximately $525 million against the 1988 purchase price. The 13-year experiment is over. The Del Vecchio era is the paradox at the center of this story. Claudio Del Vecchio is the son of Leonardo Del Vecchio, the founder of Luxottica, the Italian eyewear conglomerate that owns Ray-Ban and Oakley. Claudio grew up idolizing Brooks Brothers and believed Marks & Spencer had dissolved the house into a brand chasing Gap's customers. He bought it to bring it back. He invested. In 2007, he purchased the Southwick factory in Haverhill, Massachusetts, and brought tailored suit production back onto American soil. The same year, he hired Tom Brown as the first guest designer. The partnership launched Black Fleece by Brooks Brothers. The line was avant-garde luxury priced from $2,000 to $10,000. The garments were made by the Italian tailoring house Caruso. Black Fleece ran successfully through 2015 and generated approximately $10 million a year at its peak. It was a creative high point, not a quality compromise. The compromise came from forces larger than any one owner. Casual Friday had become casual every day. The suit category contracted industry-wide through the 2000s. Brick-and-mortar retail oversaturated. Department stores hollowed out. Brooks Brothers tried to balance heritage with modernization, and the math kept getting harder. Fused construction crept into the Madison Avenue mainline on the entry suits. Offshore assembly expanded on the shirts. Italian fabric mill relationships with Albini and Thomas Mason came under pressure. By 2019, Brooks Brothers was in sale process discussions. Then March 2020 arrived. The shutdown closed retail nationwide. On July 6, 2020, Brooks Brothers announced the layoff of all 400 employees at the Haverhill Southwick factory. 2 days later, on July 8, 2020, Brooks Brothers Group Incorporated and 12 affiliated debtors filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The case opened in the United States Bankruptcy Court for the District of Delaware. The filing secured $75 million in debtor-in-possession financing from WHP Global. The company owed 25,000 creditors between $500 million and $1 billion. At the moment of filing, it operated 424 stores globally. In August 2020, a consortium acquired Brooks Brothers for $325 million. The consortium was led by Authentic Brands Group under Jamie Salter and Spark Group. Spark operated in partnership with Simon Property Group, the largest mall operator in the United States. The bankruptcy court approved the sale. The new owners committed to keep 125 of the 424 stores operating. Through 2020 and 2021, the Garland, North Carolina shirt factory closed. The Long Island City secondary shirt facility closed. The Haverhill, Massachusetts Southwick suit factory closed. The Italian fabric mill relationships were restructured under the licensing model. The 202-year continuous operation American clothing tradition ended on a court calendar in Delaware. Brooks Brothers did not die from greed. It died from casualization, from corporate ownership cycles, from a pandemic, from the same retail bankruptcy wave that took J.Crew, J.C.Penney, and Neiman Marcus in the same months. It died from forces no single owner could outrun. Brooks Brothers is gone, but the construction is not. 5 brands still know how to build the shirt and the suit Brooks Brothers used to make. Proper Cloth in New York City has been building made-to-measure shirts since October 2008. Founder Seth Scarrett is an MIT Sloan engineer. He built the company in the wake of the financial crisis on a simple idea. Eliminate retail overhead and the markup goes with it. Italian Albini fabrics. Real mother-of-pearl shank-stitched buttons. Free remake guarantee if the fit is wrong. The made-to-measure tier runs $150 to $250 per shirt. The construction matches what Garland, North Carolina was building in 2010 on the Better Brooks Brothers lines. Spear and Mackay out of Toronto runs a direct-to-consumer model that eliminates the wholesale markup. The mall has been charging for a century. Half-canvas suits sit at $400 to $600. 2-ply long staple cotton shirts run $65 to $95 with mother-of-pearl buttons. The construction tier matches the mid-tier Brooks Brothers shirt the audience remembers from before 2010. The fits run from slim to traditional cut. The brand ships internationally. Kamakura Shirts opened on November 7, 1993, above a convenience store in Kamakura, the ancient samurai capital of Japan. Founder Yoshio Sadasue and his wife Tomiko had spent decades at Van Jacket. Van Jacket was the Japanese company that introduced Ivy League style to the country in the 1960s. The original name was Maker's Shirt, a direct tribute to Brooks Brothers' own Maker's line, the benchmark of American shirting. The mission was explicit. Continue what Brooks Brothers had begun stepping away from. 2-ply 80-count and 100-count cotton. Natural shell buttons. Traditional unfused collar construction. No formaldehyde resin. $95 to $150 per shirt. The brand opened a Madison Avenue store in October 2012, 420 paces from the Brooks Brothers flagship. Eton of Sweden was founded in 1928 in the small village of Gånghester. The company is now in its 4th generation. Swiss and Italian fabric mills, mother-of-pearl buttons, shank stitch, single needle stitching at 22 stitches per inch, $250 to $350 per shirt. Eton is the European house Brooks Brothers became, except Brooks Brothers stopped becoming it. The 5th option is the Brooks Brothers the audience actually remembers. Vintage Brooks Brothers from the pre-2001 era is available on eBay, on The RealReal, and through vintage menswear specialists who know what to look for. $40 to $150 buys a vintage shirt with the original Garland, North Carolina construction, unfused collars, 2-ply yarn, and mother-of-pearl buttons. Look for shirts with the label reading Brooks Brothers Makers rather than the post-2001 simplified label. The actual Brooks Brothers shirt the audience over 40 grew up wearing is still buyable. It is just not buyable at the Madison Avenue flagship. Brooks Brothers Madison Avenue is still open. The shirts on the rack still say Brooks Brothers. But the men who built it for 202 years would not recognize what is now sold under their name. 5 brands still know how. You know what to look for. Go find them. If you missed our breakdown on men's clothing gold mines, it's linked below at 655,000 views. And our video on men's clothing brands robbing buyers blind covers the same pattern at 370,000 views. Subscribe. This channel follows the makers who still know how, not the marketing.